Today, I'm thrilled to be having a conversation with our guest, David Thomson. David is a senior leader, executive mentor, and a transformation expert with over 25 years of experience across consulting and coaching. David is also a founder of An Imperfect Start, which is a mentoring and coaching program that supports people to speak up, find clarity, and grow from wherever they are. I've had the opportunity to work with David from a business collaboration perspective, so I know him quite well. In this episode, we're exploring a very sensitive subject, and that's age bias in the workplace and generational conflict in teams. We also talk about inclusive leadership habits and ethical technology, such as the inclusive change agent. And we also get to hear from David's perspective on how leaders and team members can eliminate age bias in the workplace and can build more collaborative generational teams that ultimately lead to organizations thriving. I'm excited. Let's go and get David. David, I'm so happy to have you here. It's just a pleasure. How are you?
I'm great. I'm fantastic. And it's always a pleasure to see you, as you know. Anyway, so it's great. And even in this setup and the way that we're doing this, it's such a unique setting that hopefully it doesn't diminish between the relationship that you and I have. And such. So,
David, you talked about cycling. So what has your cycling experience been like recently? How many miles?
So in recent times, it's not been that great compared to what I used to do. About 5 years ago, when I got heavily into it, I was cycling, a couple of 100 miles a week. I'd do a combination of club rides or sportives or go and cycle with friends. And, I did 100-milers. I know it seems a lot to some people, but you build up to it, you get yourself fit and your mindset right, and then you continue on. And then once you see overcome that type of challenge, you seek other challenges. So as I mentioned previously, me and a friend, we cycled to Paris.
Oh my God, you cycled all the way to Paris?
We did. I mean, it was intentionally we were going to do it over 24 hours. Cycle to the coast, get on the ferry, and then continue straight to Paris with that. But my friend was
Did you not get tired?
You kind of do, but the energy and enthusiasm of what you're doing kicks in, and it just allows you to kind of propel forward. That kind of energy, and particularly when you're with someone who has the same kind of drive and motivation to want to achieve something, it just takes over and it just happens. So instead of doing the 24 hours, we took a detour to go and find some hills down Rouen and then stuff like that. And we saw some fantastic sights and
that must have been beautiful.
And experience. It really was. I mean, the weather was fantastic as well. And, it was just a great experience, just a lovely weekend to cycle to Paris, just on the spot.
To cycle to Paris, not even up the road.
I'm sure you could do it, so it's something you build up to. It's like everything, you small steps, building your habits, recreate some of the challenges that you want to face and overcome.
So David, let's get stuck in. Let's have a real conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying you did just have a real conversation just then, but let's get stuck in, because we're all about inclusion. And inclusive change clinic.
Absolutely.
So David, you've worked with a wide range of people over the years and over different sectors and most importantly, different generations.
Yes.
Have you noticed any patterns in how different age groups tend to show up at work and how they tend to work together?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's been a great experience, over my professional career. I've had the opportunity to meet some really fantastic people, from different backgrounds, different experiences, and even more so across the different generations.
Yes.
When I was growing up, there was literally two generations.
Yes.
There was baby boomers and my generation of
Yes.
Generation X. And so from a career history in technology...
Not the millennials or Gen Zs.
But they hadn't really come along yet. I mean, so we really had the dichotomy of baby boomers and Generation X. But in recent times, you've got three generations who followed just as quickly. And that's a result of technology, and it's a result of, you've now got native technologists, from the womb, the minute they're born, they're handed a digital device. And
that's
so,
my children.
And the same with my daughter as well. It's no longer that thing of, let's go and open the computer. You're going, I'm already on the computer, because it's part of my anatomy. And so when you look at it with those five generations in the workplace, it is important that each of those generations are respected and understood for the point that they're in, or the place they're in, or the moment they're in. It's easy to say that they would automatically resist the legacy generation before them, and only look to the future or the uncertain future that they would hold in their generation. But for them, for most of them, it's about living in the moment. They don't want the legacy of the past, but they don't know what they're creating the legacy of the future is. So it's about living in the moment. And so when you see that within the workplace, each one is trying to kind of protect their own generation, whereas we're trying to kind of find ways of overcoming that to say, we can all work together. We bring maturity and experience alongside youth, innovation, creativity, and it's a blend that we can all adapt to. But however, those generational biases that we will talk about, they come into play, because too much ego, too much trying to protect your legacy, then kind of disrupts a sort of way of working forward.
Yes, I like that. And I like how you said, people, in how people show up, it's like they're protecting their generational experience, and that sometimes can withhold us, but at the same time, it's what makes us who we are at the same time, and if we're going to bring our true selves to work, we have to protect our generational experience, our culture that falls into that, and who we are. So interesting, But David, can I say, do you know what really sparked our conversation is the fact that there is like an age gap between us. I'm not saying how far it is. It is super.
And I only found this out recently, what the actual age difference was, because when we met last year, there was, I had no, how can I say, there was no bias, if that's what there was no kind of me kind of assuming that you were of a certain age or a certain generation. It was just you and I fell into this conversation, and we just kind of hit it off, and kind of thing where there was that natural understanding, because we shared the same values. We talked about this. We talk about the similar type experiences, although we do have the differences, and we call that out. And I think one of the things that I've always been clear to you is, my conditioning of my generation might mean that I might say something or do something that's inappropriate to your generation. And I've always asked you to call that out. If you feel uncomfortable that I've said something that I don't think, or in my mind, I didn't think it was appropriate and inappropriate, but you then correct me on it. I'm sure I'm the same. My daughter is a Gen Z, 17 years old, and there's some of the expressions I'm not allowed to say that belongs to her. And it feels like that inappropriation of generations, if you like.
Do you know what? I love the fact that, we do get along quite well. We collaborate very well. But at the same time, that's not always the case for people in the workplace.
It's not.
So what do you think are some of the subtle ways that biases show up, but thinking about it from an age perspective in the workplace?
No, indeed. And a number of biases do show up. And as we talked about there, it's about that education.
Age that older and younger together.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it is about that generational conditioning, isn't it? And it comes through whatever your experience, your upbringing, what your circumstances or in your environment that kind of shapes that. And you've talked about as well that your faith is a great thing in your life, and I understand that. And it's that understanding of what's important in a person's life, what their values are, that kind of goes some way to help relieve some of that generational tension, if you like. But noticing the tension as it exists is crucial, because just as we talked about there, I could be generationally inappropriate. Yeah. And what I find is acceptable, you might not find acceptable. And I think some of that tension can be very evident through some of that inappropriate language or behaviour that's then detrimental to you. But then equally, you could say something that's to me as well. So it works two ways. It's not. Yeah. I appreciate that historically it feels like the sort of senior manager or senior leader of an organisation will talk down to someone who's new and inexperienced, and you still got that hierarchical structure where there's no real parity in the relationship. There's no real coming together that I have certain values or I have certain skills and experiences, but I appreciate that you do as well. And if we combine them or complement them together, it can be a workable solution.
David, thinking about leadership and the role of leadership, and the fact that why do we have leadership roles? Because we have the skills and ability to deliver, and it's not leadership based on the title, the job title. Yeah. So thinking about that in mind, the fact that we are in leadership positions because of our skills and ability to deliver. David, being open and honest, if you were to be led by someone who, you had to report into that was maybe 15, 20 years younger than you, how does that make you feel?
It's an interesting question because it has happened, absolutely. It kind of feels a little bit awkward initially. Yeah. And that again comes down to that generational bias, because in the past, having come from, I guess, a traditional leadership understanding where that person at the top of the hierarchy was the leader, they had all the answers, so you reported to them, and there would generally be someone with vast amounts of years of experience and skills in that particular role, to now finding someone who's kind of, doesn't have that level, but is still intent on leadership role. It feels uncomfortable from that perspective. Yes. However, in my new perspective, as someone who's gone through that unlearning cycle, and I appreciate that the new generation will just be as capable in a leadership role without that title. And I believe in our organisations, there's lots of people who are leaders without the title. Yes. It can sometimes be, someone in a sort of junior position who has leadership capability. They've not realised it yet, or it's not quite crystallised, but nevertheless, they have leadership capability. And so just because someone has a job title saying, I'm the leader, or I'm the CEO, or have a managing title, in that respect, that doesn't necessarily make them a leader. And so we have to be cognizant of who we're being led by and what makes us feel comfortable.
That is so important. And you mentioned something, so I'm going to take your conversation of what you just mentioned and step a little bit back. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the unlearning.
Yes.
And for those listeners who are watching now and they are perhaps being, reporting into someone who's much younger and struggling with that, that's a sign of age bias. What that process of unlearning, what did that look like?
I mean, that was hard, but at the same time welcoming. Yes. Alvin Toffler says this. The illiterate of the 21st. Alvin Toffler is an author.
Okay.
And I think he might be a scientist of some sort, maybe a physicist. And he says this. He says the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those of us who can't read or write. It'll be those of us who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think that is such a fantastic thing to be able to do and to be able to recognize in your own self. And particularly, as someone in an older generation, I think adopting that becomes your mantra. Yes. And so one of the things that I had done, I mentioned it previously as well, Barry O'Reilly writes this book, and it's called Unlearn. And it takes you through that process of the unlearning cycle. Yes. And it's about, as I've just said there, it's about unlearning, relearning, and finding breakthroughs. And it's about taking you back to those, as we mentioned earlier, those values, those motivations, those intrinsic drives that you as a person, that you want to change something that's not working in your life. Yes. And addressing, realizing that in the first place, and then taking steps to address it, I think is so crucial to be able to do that.
Wow, no, that's so important. And a part of that unlearning cycle also relates to one of the wise habits, inclusive change clinic.
Absolutely.
And it's about being teachable.
Yes.
So you have to have that teachable spirit in order to unlearn as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that is what one may struggle with, is that, can I learn? Is it possible? Do I have all the answers? And we don't always have all the answers as well anyways. But I think in the workplace, going back to the workplace, it's so difficult for people to call these things out. When things are age-related, how would you call it out? When you probably feel it in your conscious because you're being led by someone who's much younger, or vice versa. Well, if it was vice versa, a younger person reporting to an older person is probably a different scenario.
Well, no.
Yeah, but but at the same time, it's not, because the younger person, sometimes might feel like they know more and can deliver more.
Well,
but how can you call it out in the workplace, or can you not call it out that you are facing a particular issue that's related to age bias? Can you call it out? Can you not call it out?
I think in this day and age, you should be able to call it out.
Okay.
I mean, we still have the legacy of traditional leadership, traditional management of the past.
Yes.
I think that's kind of slowly breaking down a little bit, because, as I mentioned there, recognising where a leadership capability exists without the title is starting to become more apparent. And I think for some organisations, that's an easy adoption. They can swing with that, knowing that someone else is more capable, so I can get them to lead in that way. Even if it's just for a single project or a single initiative or a single capability, but at least give them that opportunity to do it.
Okay.
I think what still hangs over from previous generations is still that lack of trust, that ego that they have, that I've built a legacy here. Who are you to kind of try and disrupt that?
Yes.
But I think disruption, positive disruption, is always a good thing, and I think I think when you get into that mindset where you want to reflect on where you are, what's working, what's not working, and then look to kind of adopt a different way and a different attitude to do that. I think that opens up. I think a lot of people are still stuck in that closed mindset and not really looking to, not just a growth mindset, but at least something to be more adaptable, that I'm not always right.
Yes.
And that be teachable
habit.
Principle that you mentioned there, or habit, absolutely. It works both ways, right? It's you teach me and you teach and I teach you type thing. And I think that slowly erodes that hierarchical level, because you and I think, and this is why we got on, was the fact that we were immediately on parity.
Yes.
We immediately understood that we were equals in the relationship.
Yes.
And so I wasn't your employee, you my employee, employer, etc. It was, and we've talked about this in the past, that as well, it's about creating that equity,
which is important, and respect.
Absolutely,
yes.
and I think we recognised that straight away, that we weren't going to mess with each other, and that's why sometimes I appeal to you if I say something or do anything inappropriate, then please call me out, because that's not intended. Yes. So the good values of our heart and our faith and our values is the things that we keep, we anchor from them, and so that's what we kind of helps us to kind of navigate as we move forward.
Yeah. I like that. And one thing I got out of your conversation, just going back a little bit, is where you talked about leaders and their ego and the fact that they've built up their legacy and they find it very hard. Maybe if this person had to report into someone that was much younger. To the leaders that are listening now, and they might have faced a particular situation where they could have been age biased or a different type of bias that wasn't age related. How could leaders restore that trust back in teams and align teams so that the generational gap closes when it comes to age?
No, indeed. And trust is such a crucial thing in any relationship anyway. Yes. I think you and I established that very quickly. But as you just said, it's not something that comes very naturally. And if we look at Patrick Lencioni's dysfunctions of a team, as we're talking about there, is that the foundation of trust is the crucial first step to maintaining any kind of collaborative efforts that then move forward as a functioning team. And I think that's so important to address that. And it's not a one and done or switch on. Trust doesn't happen naturally. It has to evolve. It has to be sort of born. It has to be worked out. There has to be, a sharing of wills, if you like, that starts to build that trust element. And, it's from there that everything else originates, so.
Yes, I like that. So what's one thing you would say to a leader now that's watching if they're not sure where to begin and they just want that one piece of advice to say, do you know what, I want to go back into my workplace tomorrow and I want to now direct and lead my teams because they're all different ages and different, colours and shades and all sorts. What is that one thing I can say that would turn tables?
The one thing that leaders can take away is allow yourself that time to reflect on what's working, what's not working.
Yes.
Take a little bit of time to generate an idea, and then you have to go through those slow or small habit forming techniques, if you like, with your staff, with your team, with your organisation to start making those things happen.
All right. So, David, at Inclusive Change Clinic, we are developing some amazing tools and in the realm of AI and technology. So we're bringing together organizational behavior and AI and we're intersecting that so it can produce, it can help to redefine cultures. So what the tool actually does, it works in the background like an engine. In the organization, it delivers a personalized AI agent so that it can nudge people in real time on their exclusive behaviors and allow them to become more inclusive because it will pick up their bad habits, everything they do over how they communicate in a hybrid way over text and speech. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea, actually. And, picking up on some of the elements I've said before is my generational inappropriateness. This would be perfect for that, right? Because I would have that nudge from the tool to say, no, David, you can't say that, in this space. So that would be perfect for me. But, as a tool for cross-generational purposes, it would be fantastic, right? Because it would allow you both, if we say it's both generations, or if it's a blend of different generations of different experiences, it aligns everybody to in the same way. However that text resonates with them, however that direction resonates with them, it kind of makes sure that everyone's aligned to the same purpose, same goal alongside that. How they do it is always going to be different, right? But it's you've heard the same message. And I think that's the crucial thing, isn't it? Because we've talked about the cross-cultural difference, how what people hear and what they understand can be very different. And I think a tool like that would start to align people appropriately.
No, that's so great. No, I love that. And do you know what? That's what we want to do at Inclusive Change Clinic. We want the tool to align to those company values, those kind of inclusive ways of working so that everyone can meet that same goal and objective. David, thank you today for joining me today with this conversation. Honestly, I love talking to you. It's always great. You always make me laugh and smile. Before you go, there's just one more game. Just one more game.
Okay. That's
to close the conversation, and that is our 7 Wise Habits game.
Right.
And that is a game that what we're going to do is that we're going to have one habit that is reshuffled.
Okay.
Because your 7 Wise Habits.
I've been studying.
For those that are watching, so what we're saying the 7 Wise Habits are, they are just inclusive habits that you need to adopt just to behave in an inclusive way. And they're simple, just 7 Wise Habits. Go and check them out at inclusivechangeclinic.com for more details. All right, David, so you've got a habit here from our 7 Wise Habits.
Yeah, I've been studying them.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so happy. And I'm hoping that all the listeners have been studying the 7 Wise Habits as well. David, you've got 1 minute, 60 seconds to have a quick guess on what you think this habit is.
Okay.
Feel free to reshuffle the cards and your time starts now.
Right. Okay then. This is a tricky one. I can't remember all 7. I know it's not look at the big picture. Letters are not telling me that. Be teachable. Is it teachable? You've got a T-E-A. No, not got any C's or that. Let me see if I can try and conjure up something. So let's do S-E.
Oh, you're getting something.
Is there lots of E's here? So am I saying C something?
Time's ticking.
Okay then. Maybe I've got a couple of L's.
I can see. Ooh, self.
Self. Apologies, I've dropped that.
Well, I think you dropped one.
Apologies there.
Oh, time's going.
Okay.
Are we nearly going to be there?
Okay, so maybe evaluate.
Oh, yes.
That make it?
Yes, you got it. Self-evaluate.
Evaluate. There we go. Get it?
Well done. Self-evaluate, one of the 7 wise habits.
Yes,
David, quickly, in 10 seconds, or 20 seconds, tell me something about self-evaluate.
So this is a crucial one of the 7 wise habits. Mary Beth, it is about that self-regulation.
Yes.
It's realizing that something is not quite right, or a thought has crept into your mind that's not appropriate. It's come in, but you can never control your thoughts anyway. But I think you should always be conscious that the thought that comes into your mind is inappropriate. I don't need to act on it. It's not. I mean, we should do that anyway, right? I mean, every thought that comes into your mind, you don't need to act on. It's just there. But again, using this self-regulation allows you to realise that your thoughts and your behaviours and your actions shouldn't have an impact on anyone else.
Love that. David, thank you again for joining us.
Been
And a big
pleasure.
well done.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.